So tonight we will see some things and we will learn about what we can do about these things that we see and that we learn about. So thank you for being here. And I'll turn it over to Adriana to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Annie, and thank you everyone again for being here tonight with us in Making Visible. We are super excited to have with us tonight Irene Cloutier. Irene Cloutier is a great artist and inspiring curator, and mainly for me, she's one of my best friends. So I'm really, really happy to have her because I know how much she has to share with all of us. I'm gonna read Irene's bio so you know a little more about her. Irene is a Mexican-American artist who lives and works in the Washington, D.C. area since 2000. She has a BA at Monterrey University, MA at George Mason University, and works with a variety of media from digital photography to sculpture, installation art, and drawing. Her work has been shown widely around the United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, and Europe. She has exhibited her work in 14 solo shows, 3 more showings this year. Irene has participated in more than 200 exhibitions around the globe. Irene is a multidisciplinary artist who has worked exploring the memories and longings of children, games, and toys. She has also worked in series where she analyzes words of opposite concepts and that create tension and coincide with lyrics, making a visual analogy of how opposing feelings can also have points of coincidence. She has also worked with the sculptures made of paper cache and other concepts inspired not only by Mexican toys, but by the great work and color of Mexican artisanal traditions and the urban landscape. She's also an entrepreneur, writes about art, and has curated and worked on productions of several exhibitions in Mexico and in the United States, using her immigration experience as a way to create bridges and to connect countries through culture and art. So thank you so much, Irene, for being here with us tonight. And the space is for Irene right now. We will have about 45 minutes, and then we will open the floor for everyone to participate and to ask questions to Irene. Thank you, Irene. Please go.
Thank you, Adriana and Annie, for hosting me and having me on this space. It's a great honor to be here. And I would like to see, and Annie, that requires help from you, if you can open the mics, and I would like to start just with a very quick question and see who wants to answer the question, just to see where we are at with the knowledge of women artists. So my question is, if maybe 2 or 3 of you can name 3 women artists. And of course, if somebody says that name, do not repeat the name when it's your turn to go.
There are at least 3 on this call.
Well,
yeah.
Georgia O'Keeffe, Judy Chicago, and I'll pick someone local, my friend in DC, Marilee Mojica.
Awesome. Thank you, Abby.
Kate Millett, Gloria Steinem, and Frida Kahlo.
Thank you, Linda.
Can I say Teresa Margolles, Perla Krause, y Fernanda Caballero.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Alana or Ayana.
Ana Mendieta, Mary Corse, and there's so many others. Oh my God, why am I blanking on her name? Alice Neal.
Awesome. So I guess the idea, and Annie, you can go back and mute everybody. Thank you for sharing. The idea was just to make us conscious and be present to the fact that we do know women artists, but we also struggle to find the names that they don't repeat, because normally there's only like 2 or 3 that pop into our head. And I will probably guess that Frida Kahlo is on top of most people, and maybe Louise Bourgeois and Georgia O'Keeffe. And I'm not saying that they're not great artists, they are. But the reality is that we have been taught and trained because of we are part of the system and the way the system is built. So when we go to museums, we see a majority of men. And it doesn't mean that there's not women artists. So I just wanted to start with us, with that as an exercise for us to be aware of where we are standing. Because I think we can all, if we think harder, we all know probably more than 15 women artists, but they're not always on top of our heads because we're not seeing them on the regular basis. So with that said, I'm gonna start sharing my screen, and I have a presentation. I wanted to do a presentation that was not only statistics, because I don't wanna like get you guys dizzy with statistics, but it is important to paint a picture of how things are right now. And give me just 1 second. So, and then we're gonna go into solutions. Well, I don't wanna just leave it on the bad part or the absence of inclusion. So, okay, share screen, got it. And we're gonna start, okay. So, and well, my information, my website and my tag for most social media is right there. But I just wanted also guys to see my name written because I think it's easier for people to get familiar. Okay, I'm gonna start with this because if I understand that there's artists here and all of the people who are more into arts have probably seen one of the works made by Guerrilla Girls. And the Guerrilla Girls, they stood up outside of the Met Museum with a banner that read just like this one that said, do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? Less than 4% of the artists in the modern art sections are women, but 76% of the nudes are female. So they have done several versions of or revisions of this banner. They did a revision when they were in Brazil. They did a revision like 5 or 10 years later. And the last one I found, it only says 5% and 84% of the nudes. So there has not been a lot of increase in the inclusion of women in the arts. Generally speaking, and of course, it fluctuates according to the statistics that we look into and who, which museums we're talking about. I'm going to talk about just very specific statistics. The Manchester Gallery of Art has 80% male, 80% male and 85% white in their collection. 5.6% of New York City galleries are women of color only. 11% of acquisitions of women at 26 prominent museums in the US in the past decade were women, and only 14% were shown on museums and art centers in the US in the past decade. So, and for me, the more I have researched this, it comes to my attention, first of all, this is a country that had the immense difference that they name the mother of modern art a woman, which is Georgia O'Keeffe that somebody mentioned at the very beginning. So considering that this is a country that actually included or took as the guide of the leader of the modern art movement, a woman, and then we went from that to not having a lot of inclusion, I think it's interesting that it didn't open up more opportunities for more women. So if you guys don't know who the Guerrilla Girls are, and this is the first time you're hearing talk about them, Guerrilla Girls are a collective of women that they perform and present statistics to raise awareness about inequalities and lack of inclusion in the art world from the anonymity. So they always are dressed in black, wearing gorilla mask, and they use names of women artists as nicknames to refer to and talk when they are giving a talk. So let's say when they came to the Hirschhorn, I think the lady was named Frida Kahlo. And if you hear a podcast where they are talking about, somebody's going to be named maybe Judy Chicago or any other female artist that they choose. So they do everything from the anonymity, but they have done a lot of work and have raised a lot of awareness. The latest protests and shows that or investigations or research that they have been doing and the way they have been raising their voices is regarding abuse and the Me Too movement inside the art world, and like sexual abuse, people who are not ethic in the work environment inside museums and art institutions as well. So I just wanted to show you a photo of them so you have them in your mind. And we're gonna go with a bit of numbers, and then we're gonna go more on the fun side with some images as well. It says a data analysis of 18 major US art museums found their collections are 87% male and 85 white. This is according to a presentation that the National Museum of Women in the Arts has on their website. And representation in collections, major US art museums, so white men, Latino men, Asian men, white women, and all other groups are less than 1%. So, and again, I don't want to like make you dizzy with all these statistics and graphics, but I think it will paint a great picture of how the art world is right now. And then we can go into my own experience and then what I think we can all do to change it. 14% of the exhibitions at the 26 prominent US museums over the past decade were works by women artists. So only 14% in 26 museums. And then it says just 5.6% of artists in New York City galleries are women of color, but they are 90% of the US population. So again, the disparity is like when you see the pie on the left corner, it's staggering. Top 10 artworks by price and category at auction in 2019. So the reason I wanted to talk about the art market and the art auction market is because, especially maybe in the last 30 years, more maybe in the last 20 years particularly, the art market has become a big thing, and it has become what it dictates, what is shown in museums, and then the first legitimization from artists goes into the galleries. So if galleries are not showing women, they're not showing women of color, they're not showing minorities, then the museums don't invite them, or they don't get into museums collections or museum shows. And then they don't go into auctions. And so the whole art market chain becomes like the way it is right now. So this is another example. And I found a lot of information about this in Spain and in Argentina mainly, more than in other Spanish-speaking countries. And this was news, I remember, a few years ago. And I was really stunned just to see that the Museo del Prado in Madrid in almost 200 years had never shown an exhibition of a woman artist. So in 2016, they showed for the first time ever a solo show by a woman artist, Clara Peters. She's a 17th century Flemish artist. And it has not been another solo exhibition by a woman since then. So 197 years of the Museum of El Prado in Spain without a woman. And a lot of people can say a lot of things, and I'm just going to give you some different ideas and things that are happening around the world. For instance, a lot of museums have sat around and they started like noticing this, and they want to change the rhetoric. And what they started doing, for instance, the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, what they did, they started including, and they literally rehung the entire museum exhibition and collection to include applied arts and crafts as well. Because in the 14th, 15th, and 16th century, women were not allowed into formal education in artist studios. So they all, or a lot of them were working in applied arts. So they started including applied arts to be able to include women as well. That was one of the things that the Uffizi Gallery is doing. The Tate Modern actually made a huge renovation. They rehung the entire exhibition and collection to retell the story from a different perspective, including women as well. The MoMA did a recent renovation as well, like 4 years ago, with an inclusion idea in their mind, and they're showing more women of color, more minorities. And now we can see, for instance, David Alfaro Siqueiros, which is a Mexican muralist, right next to Francis Bacon. And it changes the way we read the entire exhibition. And I can say that not only as a Mexican, which I felt very proud to see that they were showing my artists next to other artists, and we all know that representation matters, but also it gives you, art has been there for forever and for centuries to represent and tell stories and be the evidence of history. So if you're not putting representation in art, you're not telling the full story. And art right now, with the earlier statistics that was shown, has been told the story from a male perspective. And since we're talking about Spain and the Museo del Prado, I'm going to give you a couple more examples. In Spain, in 2002, they started doing a very big prize, art prize, that is called the Velázquez Prize. And there's never been, no woman has ever won the Velázquez Prize in Spain since its creation in 2002. So it's been 20 years. The only woman that has won the prize is not a woman from Spain, is Doris Salcedo, a Colombian artist. And it was in 2010. And since 2010, no other woman has won the Velázquez Prize. Another interesting fact, since we're talking about Spain, Arco is Spain's biggest art fair. It's like the Armory Show or Frieze in Spain, and it happens every February. And it's a very big exhibition. It's very important, not only in Spain, but it's one of the most important ones in Europe. And only 25% of artists in Arco are women, and only 13% of women get into collections on sales in Arco. By contrary, we have 65% of students in art schools are women, and 74% of students in art history are women. So my question is, where are all these students who are graduating from art and from art history, and what are they doing? And why are they not showing at the same level or at the same amount of times and the same exhibitions and art spaces and museums if that many women are going to art school. Talking about I'm going to go back to this one. Talking about positive things, and particularly in Spain, since we were talking about Spain. The Museum Reina Sofia in Madrid, it started in 2008, a big change in working in equality and representation, and acquisitions now are 46% of women versus 54% of men. So they made a conscious effort and change, and they're actually doing it. This is not the norm for most museums, and we can talk about museums here in DC a little bit later, and you guys will be surprised if you have not noticed that there's not very many women. The good news is, like, this year at the Venice Biennale, Cecilia Vicuña won the Golden Lion. Golden Lion of the Venice Biennale is the Oscars in the art. And well, also Caterina Fritsch, the one that did the big blue rooster that is at the National Gallery of Art East building, she also won a Golden Lion for achievement award with Cecilia Vicuña. But I want to mention Cecilia Vicuña because she's the first Latina of indigenous descent that wins the Golden Lion at the Venice Biennale since its origin. So this is a big thing, and it's a big change in the art world with Cecilia Vicuña winning this. And Cecilia has actually spoke about it, and she says that she hopes that now this opens the door for more women and for more indigenous women to be included in arsenals and spaces and representation of countries at the Biennale as well. Cecilia lives in New York, but she's from Chile. This is some of Cecilia's works. So she works in very diverse media. She works on installation art, but she also does painting. And I just wanted to show you a couple of things so you know who we're talking about the prize. This is not what she did at the Biennale, but this is an example of her work. And this is another example of her paintings. And as you can see, there is a lot of color representation, and there is also a lot of history of abuse and colonialism in her work as well. Okay, another women artist that I was surprised that nobody, Barbara Kruger. Since if you guys live in DC, the Hirshhorn has a huge installation by Barbara Kruger downstairs on the basement before you get into the restroom and the store and the auditorium area. And first of all, this image has made a lot of Instagram posts in the last weeks with the whole discussion about the abortion issue in the United States. And it has become kind of like a flag for women's right to choose. Also, I found this work by Barbara Kruger, and I feel that it can be kind of like a flag that we can all raise and just be conscious that if we don't do anything about these things, we become complicit on any injustice, not just in art. Okay, this is a quote that I got from an article, and it says, the rise to prominence of women, LGBTQ, and artists of colors is packed with problems from the very start. Every finding a gallery to represent them is not without its difficulties. A recent study showed that over 80% of American artists represented by a top New York galleries are white and 70% are male, which means that Asians, 8.1%, African, 8.8%, Latino 2.1%, Middle Eastern is 1%, Pacific Islander is 0.2%, and Native American artists are 0.1%, are struggling to reach a 20% mark, even though combined, they comprise the majority of New York residents. And this is, again, just a way of highlighting the differences. And lastly, I found this infographic from Marco, the fair that we were talking about earlier, from this year edition in February. And you can see the pie that is highlighted in green and pink. And that is the representation of and the participation of women versus men, women being the pink and green being the men. And on the other graphic says artista mujer, women artists, male artists, and then the total of the directors, either gallery directors or directors, institutions that show women. This is regarding Latin American art. So now I want to start talking also about my experience, because that is what I know best. And I'm going to give you specifically some numbers and some statistics on Latino women. So as Adriana said on the introduction, I am a Mexican-American artist. I moved here in 2000. And for the largest majority of my life, being Mexican was all I knew, but it didn't mean that much. And it didn't mean a lot until you move to another country. Then your nationality becomes a very big part of your identity and the way you are defined by yourself and by others. So talking about Latinx, 19% of the US population is Latino. This is a 5% increase since 1970, and it is estimated that in the next 10 years, it raises to 28% of Latino in the population. I read this quote as I was doing my research on an article, and it says the canons of art and history must be pushed to meet the world we live in. So as I was saying before, if art is supposed to be to illustrate history and illustrate our world and our common era, and we don't have representation and inclusion, then we are not telling the story with all the colors and all the diversity that it needs to be told. We cannot talk about protests. For instance, in this country, a lot of women started like showing up in the art world in the 60s with protest art, video art, happenings, and all these other alternative ways of producing art and showing art. And yet there's very, very little representation and talk about Chicano art or Chicano artists. And we cannot talk about protests in the arts without including Chicanos. At the same time that the civil rights movement was happening in this country, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta were also doing a magnificent fight for the rights of Latino immigrants and Latino workers in the farms and the crops. So we cannot talk about art with social content and revolution and civil rights without the inclusion of Latino voices. And I mean Latino voices not only at the Latino Museum, we hope to see Latino voices everywhere as well. So as this slide says, in 2007, I started creating, as I said, I moved here in 2000, and then in 2007, I noticed that I wasn't getting into a lot of shows. I was submitting my work for open calls, and something interesting happened that I was already showing a lot in Mexico in different museums and institutions. And even at the beginning, when I first moved here, I was invited to an art salon in Mexico that was showing at the Museum of Modern Art in Mexico City. And at the same time, here in DC, I was showing at alternative spaces, and I wasn't being invited or being included in a lot of shows. I had a gallery in Miami, and I was doing very good with that gallery in Miami. They were showing my work in different art fairs around the country and around the world as well. But I wasn't being included, or I didn't feel included in the DC area. So at some point after I moved here, I noticed that I was not only a Mexican artist, but I was also labeled as Latina artist. So then I I was like, I'm going to stop complaining about not being included, and I'm going to start creating opportunities for me and for others. So in 2007, I approached the Mexican Cultural Institute. There was the first attempt to do an art fair in DC at that point at the convention, the new convention center. And I suggested the Mexican Cultural Institute to allow me to curate a show of Latino artists living in the DC area. The way I sold the show, or the idea of the show, was that if we did it with local artists, it wasn't going to cost a lot of money, and it was going to show the diversity that it wasn't going to be shown at the art fair. So they allowed me to do this show, and you can see on the left-hand side, the name of the show was Directions, DC Contemporary Latino Art. It was co-curated by me and Laura Roulet. And the photo on the right is the page of with one of my artworks that it was included at the exhibition. Then, oh, I think I have one slide missing. Okay. This series, Paisaje Regio means that you are from the north of Mexico in Monterrey. That's how they call, like in the same way we say Washingtonians here in Washington. Regio means that you are from Monterrey. So I lived in Monterrey for 10 years and I went to school there. And then I worked there for some years. Then I moved here to the United States. When I moved here to the DC area, I noticed that there were not a lot of billboards, and there was not a lot of visual contamination like what there is in my country and many other Latin American countries. So I kind of like started missing having this, in my opinion, these billboards and signs are also an expression of our popular culture. So when I was able to go back to Mexico the first time after a year and a half of not being able to travel because of my green card, I started taking photos of different signs and creating this series. In total, this series was 10 images that they were all of three-dimensional signs that for some reason people in companies in big corporations started like making three-dimensional billboards. There are a couple here in the DC area, but I haven't seen that many. And for instance, the down bottom at the right-hand side that it says Monterrey, Cemex or Cemex. Cemex is the biggest cement company in Latin America and one of the biggest ones in the world. And this is an actual sack of cement sign, like a sign that is shaped in the shape of a sack of cement, three-dimensional. If you see a little bit on the edges, you can see that it has volume as a sack of cement. So I created this artwork, and I think it was just also kind of like my way of coping with being away from home and missing this landscape, and then bringing a little bit of home back here. Then I started being included in Latino shows. And it says here, my identity as a Mexican was never important to me until I emigrated to the United States. Then I was boxed under the Latino label, and most of the opportunity that I was getting was on Hispanic Heritage Month as a Latino artist. And I'm not trying to diminish or minimize the importance of doing shows or exhibitions to raise awareness and visibility during the Hispanic Heritage Month, but I felt that this is almost all the opportunities that I was getting, and I was not included in many other shows. I kept knocking on doors on galleries and different art centers, and I kept getting rejected. And yes, there is a part in a sense also that you can say that maybe I was too young and my work wasn't mature enough, but there was a disparity in the way I was showing and getting a lot of acceptance and reviews and success in other parts of the country, like in Miami, in LA, in Houston, Texas, that I had a gallery there as well. I even shown in Paris and in Spain, in other places, and I wasn't getting a lot of shows here in the DC area. So I showed with the Capital One art program like 3 or 4 times. And I actually had my first solo show in 2010 at the Capital One art program. So it took me 10 years to have the first solo show in the DC area. At that point, I had 4 or 5 different solo shows between Houston and Miami, but not here in DC. As I was, oh, sorry, that was my bell to make me aware of time. As I was continued to work in different media and different approaches of my work, this is another work that I did. This sign is on Route 50 in Arlington, very close to Seven Corners. And it's just a visual exploration of how the urban landscape changes and how it adapts also to the market. So the first one, the 199, was done in 2009. And the photo, I took it in 2008. And then the other one was done 10 years later in 2019. It's a photo of the same sign. And for years and years, I used to drive by there and I was like, why is it that, how can they afford not to raise the prices? And it kept just like cutting my eye and my attention that they were not raising the prices. And then when they finally rose the price, I noticed that there was also that they do offer wash and fold. And I know it might seem like something very, not very important, but I see it as the way businesses are adapting. And he also had a sign underneath that there that it said that they spoke Spanish. So this is an area that it has been getting more and more populated by Latino people. So they are actually trying to adapt to that market. This artwork is part of an installation that is called The Other Gaze, or La Mirada del Otro. And the work is about the perception of how we are seen by others and how we see others. So the idea is that when you stand in front of the installation that is 17 fish bowls, you are, every fishbowl has a photo of an eye that is intervened, and then it has all these wiggly eyes, and the fishbowl itself functions or works as the eye, the human eye. So then when you're standing in front of it, you can feel how you are seen by others, and you can see how we label or judge other people as well. And that has to do with also my own reflection about feeling or not feeling included and accepted in this country, and accepting my own, finding my own space in this country as well as an immigrant. Then I did this series that I've been, it's an ongoing series that is called Opposites, and it's part of what Adriana read on the bio, that I take opposite words that end with the same letter, and then I flip the text and I unite them by the letter that they share, just to make a visual reference and a visual way of showing that every single opposite, in my opinion, either it's a feeling or a thing, it's connected. So there's no good, absolute good or absolute bad, and nobody's all good or all bad, and so forth with each of the other ones. And the left and right and the here and there, I made it for a submission of a biennial that it was called Bienal de las Fronteras, Biennial of the Border. I wasn't accepted on the biennial, but I made those. I'm thinking about going up and down, north and south, and being here and not being here, feeling that you're here and not here at the same time. So then in 2018, I presented at the Mexican Cultural Institute, and Annie actually came for that, to visit that exhibition along with other people from the Sangha. This is an installation that I did as an altar or an ofrenda for the Day of the Dead. And all the work was done in paper mache, and all inside the boats are skulls that they are hand painted. And the sign that it says Mujeres on the left-hand side, it says La vida no vale nada, life is worthless. And the altar was dedicated to women victims of femicide in the world. So that's why it says that life is worthless, because there is a pandemic of femicide generally in the world, but I feel particularly in Latin America, and it's a big problem. And the problem with countries in Latin America that there is a lot of corruption and there is not consequences. So it has come to the point where you can kill or do anything with a woman, and there will be no consequences. And men are growing and knowing that they can do anything and there will be no consequences. So this is another shot of the same installation, so you can see the skulls a little bit better. And also the skulls that they're hanging on the windows, they're also made with paper mache and tissue paper, as well as the sign. When I was fabricating the paper mache boats and the skulls and the sign, I was also very conscious that this is the way piñatas are made traditionally in Mexico, and it's an ancestral tradition that people carry from generation to generation, and the businesses are passed one generation to another one. This is a series of piñatas that I made. This is my interpretation of a piñata. I was invited to do a piece for an organization that supports women with cancer. And the theme then was alchemical vessels, and it was about finding joy. So my interpretation was that sometimes you have to whack a piñata and break it open to get to the sweet and the enjoyment of life. And piñatas traditionally in Mexico are used on the celebrations before Christmas, that they're called posadas. And the original piñata is made in a shape of a star, and with 7 peaks or 7 cones, and each peak represents one of the capital scenes. And it's star because it's supposed to be the Bethlehem star that it guides, that it guided the 3 wise men to find baby Jesus for Christmas. This is another series that I've been doing for the last probably more than 8 years, and it has become kind of like the traveler's journal, where I take my little notebook. These are 8.5 by 4.25 inches each. And it's little drawings. The series is called Everyday Objects. And the idea is just to do a quick sketch. I don't use a pencil and I don't use eraser. And then I just take on the drawing. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not interested in perfection or perfect perspective or perfect lines. You can see there's a lot of mistakes in many of them, but it's about making like a snapshot of the moment and little objects that also define spaces and define people as well. And for instance, I have many pantries, and if I go to Adriana's pantry, her pantry is probably going to be different than my pantry, because whatever she buys every week is different than what I buy every week. This is another series that I made on paper mache with the same technique as the piñatas, and it's called Aviones I Wanna Fly. And it's making a reference also of the movement and the immigration from one country to another one, and just traveling in general. And lines that I use to decorate the airplanes make a reference of the decorations that commercial airplanes have on the tail of the plane. And lastly, this is the image that they use for the invitation to this talk. And this sign, I did it in 2020 for an exhibition that it was called Aceptar, that I curated at the John Hisauka Healing Arts Gallery in Washington, D.C. And I don't think it needs a lot of explanation, but I guess my invitation with this sign is not for people to agree with me. It's for people to consider that a human can only be a human and it cannot be anything else. And that the fact that we call undocumented immigrants in this country illegal aliens have a lot of impact, and words actually matter when we label people that way. And just making a reference to the discourse that is out there about illegality or being illegal or not illegal. If crossing a border will make you illegal, then everybody in jail will be illegal as well, because crossing a border is not, it doesn't make them illegal. It just is an illegal action that they are doing because of desperation. So if committing an illegal act makes you illegal, then everybody in jail will be illegal as well under that category or that idea. So my invitation is to consider that we need to change the name, and we need to change the discourse regarding this, because a human can only be a human. It cannot be anything else. And lastly, before we open up the floor for questions, I wanted to invite everybody to small changes. What are the things that we can do to make a change and be part of the change? And these are things that we can all do, like starting right now. Follow women's pages on social media. Having followers and liking things and posts makes a difference for people. Consider that every visual artist that you know has a small business to promote. And every time you like what they do on social media, makes that posting show for other people, and that increases their visibility. So a small like, it's a big support for visual artists, musicians, architects, dancers, actors, and any other art form. Buy and make a commitment to buy more from women, from small business owners at the corner store, for women designers, for women's music, and so forth. And also I say, if there is a movie or a concert or an art exhibition by a woman, attend the event. Sometimes I see when there is a movie that is directed by a woman, that it has very bad reviews. And the way I see it is I need to go and see it and support it, even if it has bad reviews, because we're sending the message to the corporations and the movie theaters that we want to see more stories from the female perspective. And if we don't go and see the movie, then we're not giving them the opportunity to keep telling stories and producing art. And then lastly, if you have it on your budget, collect art by women. And I will invite everybody that attended this talk today to look around whatever art you have bought in your house and think about how many women do you have in your collection, and just ask yourself if you have enough women in your collection. And if you don't, make an effort to buy art by women and art by minorities and brown people as well. So that's, if you want to open the floor, Annie, for questions.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rene. Perfect. This is amazing, Rene. I think we all know, but we don't know at the same time what is happening. So it's really great to see that in numbers and in words from an artist. And that's part of what it's making visible. That we want to make a difference, having people from the group that we are talking about, speaking from their own experience. So I don't know if you agree, Annie, and everyone. We are not that many. I don't know, Irene, how do you want to proceed? Do you want people to open their mics, or do you want them to write the questions in the chat and read them, whatever you prefer?
However people want to do it. I think, as you said, we're not that many. We can open it. Actually, I'm seeing here on the comments some, like Patty Pomenta mentioned Yayoi Kusama and Alma Thomas and Laurie Anderson as well on the women artists. And I just wanted to say, I did a little bit of research on the art market, and the best-selling women artists are Yayoi Kusama, Joan Mitchell, Louise Bourgeois, George O'Keeffe, and Agnes Martin, or Agnes Martin. And that all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those 6 women represent 40% of the sales of women, of total women. So when there is women sales and they sell well, all the money goes to 5 women basically. And of those, there's only 1 alive. So.
Thank you. Someone wants to start with a question or comment to Rene, please unmute yourself and go ahead, please.
Wait, yeah.
I'll go first, in part because I have 2 small children and my husband has been putting them to bed. So I'm so glad for this presentation. Thank you very much for making it. It was wonderful, and I may have to go. So I just kind of wanted to put my thoughts a little bit first. Usually I'd hang out back more. But one thing I was curious about is I see we have an intrepid Dawn Rombach, or excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name, but otherwise we are all women here. And I was curious whether what anyone's thoughts were about when you go support a woman artist. Bring your brother, bring your husband, bring your neighbor, bring your father, whoever it is, because I find that so many of these conversations are wonderful and we have so much agreement and desire for change and support amongst ourselves. This is the thing that I find is interesting, you know, I don't want to say this is a female trait, but I find that collaboration is something that is more common among females often than the sort of capitalistic male dominated society that is prevalent in the United States. So bringing men into it to be a part of it, you know, I don't want it to be about them, but just to remember a little bit, you know, in so many ways that leverage can help, and it changes the dialogue as well, where instead of having these conversations amongst ourselves, we can legitimize these perspectives as human perspectives, not just female or minority perspectives or LGBTQ perspectives. We really need to kind of, my opinion is that we kind of need to make sure that everybody is hearing it. So that was just sort of my one contribution or thought. And the other is that I do love the idea of expanding the idea of art as craft, because in so many eras in history, art was craft. There really wasn't that distinction between fine art and what was made and used every day. And in many societies, for instance, where people were, you know, they didn't have, in Bedouin societies, for instance, where it was more about song and theater and poetry, you know, it wasn't about the object. There are many, many places where women have been leaders, but it's not recognized if we define our concept of art to this very one tiny little way. So I was encouraged to hear what you said about other museums, including craft, for lack of a better word, in their collections. Maybe it's a way to just boost their metrics, but maybe that's not a bad thing, because it is a part of how we
it's
our
also,
experience.
yes, thank you for making that comment. And yes, the reason they did it too is because it took a very long time for women to be accepted at a university, and in order for them to be able to study art. So the only way of retelling the story is including all these other works that they were doing, and most of it falls into applied arts like pottery and embroidery and tapestry and all of these other forms of art.
Exactly. And there is so much richness there. And I find that a lot of current artists bring that heritage into the artwork. Not all, and certainly they don't need to. Everyone tells their story their own way. But I find that when we open our conception of what creativity can mean and how it connects people across time and across cultures, for me, that's kind of what the power of art is. And we can do that in many, many, many different ways.
Thank you. Annie.
Can I, as Annie, I just want to say a couple things. One, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate hearing it. Don is our captioner, so he is not here as a learner. That said, we're all learning together that we can't really tell who is identifying as a woman and who is not. So we don't want to assume that on this call, but that it is funny Don isn't here by just because he felt like it. Thanks.
Thank you. And please open your mics if you want to continue with this conversation.
I just want to thank you very much for your presentation. I found it to be very enlightening once again to statistics, which I studied a little bit myself before presenting. I live on Bainbridge Island in Washington State, And it so happens that the director of our Bainbridge Island Museum and the founder's female. The director is a gay man who and I suggested to them that that we do a women in photography exhibition. And he was very amenable to doing that. And it turned out to be one of the best exhibits, and people agreed like their favorite that the museum has done. And since then, our museum has been very active in addressing these issues of non-inclusion by including many women and many people of color and many LGBT and people who are gender neutral, and making our stories the focus. And so I just wanted to point that out. And then also I was looking around my house, and nearly all the art in my house is my own. And I think that's funny. But the only other art that I have is from Lita Albuquerque, who's a friend of mine, and Carrie Mae Weems, with whom is another great photographer who started Women in Photography International. I was part of that back in LA in the 80s. And so, yeah, I mean, it's before I raced home to come to your lecture, but an hour before I got home, I was sobbing because I'm heartbroken by what's going on in the United States right now, where women are concerned. Particularly, everything that happened today is just over the top, even more than it and what could happen. I'm heartbroken about that, but I mean, I think that this has been going on for so long that we've been ignored, we've been shut down, we've been. I mean, as a photographer, I have really beautiful artwork, and it doesn't get out there the way the men's does. It never has, and I don't know if it ever will. I mean, we've been dealing with this for so long, and I loved what Annie said in the beginning, which is if you see something, do something, which is Thich Nhat Hanh's approach. And I've been thinking, what the fuck can I do? You know, to express how deeply shocked and hurt and overwhelmed and disappointed and blown away and just angry I feel about all the situation for women artists as well as just women, you know, in the United States at this point. So I appreciate everything you said, and you know, I really would love to see it get better, but right now I feel like I'm feeling very disappointed, and I've been hurt so much by men in the industry that I'm in, especially when I was a rock and roll photographer. I mean, that whole thing is an industry men are running. So anyway, I thought I'd share my 2 cents. When this started, I started crying because it's just, I feel so hurt. So not like Thich Nhat Hanh in the sense of seeing. I'm feeling, my whole body feels like just this vibratory field of just, it's almost overwhelming me right now. And I don't know what I will do or what I won't do about that as an artist. I've had so many thoughts in the middle of the night of what to do to express myself right now. And none of them seem like I'll ever do them. They just, I almost feel violent, you know, like just standing on a stage and letting people cut parts of my body to off me, to express how deeply upset I feel and how much I want to express it, but I'm just not sure in any way how at this point.
Thank you, Linda, for sharing. And Well, first of all, I wanna applaud your honesty and your sharing from so honest and so openly. And I also wanna applaud and congratulate you for the show that you were talking about at the very beginning of how showing minorities has made a difference, and it has been really well accepted. So we all need to make a change and promote that. Like, talk to your if you guys know any gallery owners, you can talk to them. If you know any people on the museum boards, talk to them. And so those are the little things that we can start doing to make a difference. Dara Dots has her hand raised. If you want to unmute yourself.
Thank you. I have a question on a very different subject that you touched on about buying female artists. I have a good friend who's an artist and who happens to, I mean, I have more than one good friend. Abby is a friend of mine and I consider her an artist. I mean, she is an artist. Anyway, and I was talking with him, and essentially in the galleries where he is, however you put it, you know, one of the people they're showing, they take 50% of what his art is sold for. And you had talked about, you know, galleries being the way to go. And I wondered, I guess my opinion was always to buy from the artist directly. But if I understand from what you're saying that that isn't going to help artists get represented. So I'm curious your response.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, so most galleries take from living artists 50%. Art dealers work on a range between 10% to 30%, depending on the arrangement they have with the artists. And my comment, I made it because Eugenio Lopez, who is one of the biggest collectors in the world, and he's a Mexican collector, certainly one of the biggest Mexican collectors, but he also is always on the top list of collectors in the world. What he says is that when he likes an artist, he respects the artist enough to go and buy the artwork from the gallery, to let the gallery know that he considers that artist worthy, even though the gallery knows that he knows the artist. So I understand your point, and yes, the artist might win more if you buy from the studio, but it's also something to consider that maybe on occasions you can also buy at a gallery if you're gonna pay pretty much the same, and you're supporting the entire ecosystem as well. Because artists, yes, they only make, they sell and they get 50% from the sales, but also the gallery does a work that the artist sometimes cannot do, or doesn't have time to do, or don't want to do, or doesn't know how to do, in the sense that galleries have a tendency to have more reach for getting into collections and other art spaces. So I'm not going to tell you what to do, but that's my opinion. And my opinion is based on the opinion of a very well-known collector that has a museum in Mexico and all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I
It
think
looks
that
like we have 3 hands up, yeah, so far. Camille, and then Abby, and then Patty.
Hi. First, I want to just say thank you, Irene, so much. I feel like this is a wake-up call for me, and I will definitely take all of your suggestions to heart. And I thank Annie and Adriana for bringing you to us. And also, I saw your Day of the Dead exhibit. It was amazing, tearful, and so many other adjectives I can't describe. It was amazing. And then just one last thing I wanted to share with people. in case you haven't been there, there is a really amazing exhibit at the Phillips Gallery. The artist is Marta Perez Garcia, and it's through August 28th, and it's called Intersections. And it's, I think it's 19 or 20 headless female torsos. And it's about, it addresses increased domestic violence. And she handmade these torsos are made of paper and other various materials. And it is really powerful as well. So I just wanted to share that with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Camille. So, Abby, if you want to unmute yourself so you can ask your question.
Yeah, I'll dive in. Thank you, Irene, for this presentation and bringing the topic to light. And I also want to acknowledge what Linda said, because that was really spoken strongly and from the heart. I have so much to say about so many things that came up, because a lot of my experiences intersect a number of things that came up, but I will be really brief. For me, I think the piece about getting your work into galleries and museums, it adds a validity to your work in the eyes of collectors and the world, and I think that's an important aspect of that. But having worked in museums for many decades, until recently, it's, I don't know if painful is the right word, but it's, most museums are run by white men. And there's been, in the time I've been in the museum field, there has been a little bit of a shift, but not a seismic shift, not a huge shift. And so I think when you talk about what's going on in museums, that's a really big boulder to push up a really, really, really big hill. And I find for me, for my work, I've been really successful selling direct with commissions and through my studio, and having some very regional, local gallery representation. And I'm at a place where I'm good with that, because I get to be a I get to be a painter, I get to be an artist, and there are people that it just makes me so happy when somebody wants to bring something I created into their home to live with. And that's important. And there was one other thought I had on the tip of my tongue, and I'm slipping a little bit here. But but thank you so much for the presentation. I know the other thing that I did want to share that I was thinking about too, as a white woman who's an artist at this stage in my career and in my life. I've been thinking a lot about how, in terms of the wider representation in the world out there, I feel like I should. It's both a question and a statement. Like, should I, and also that I should step aside to make more space for BIPOC artists. That even though women have a really uphill battle in general, including white women, that I feel there's a need for me to step aside also and make space for others. So that was a bunch of really quick bullet points. Thank you for letting me share, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Abby. And first, I almost want to apologize for assuming that everybody wants to take that path of validation through a gallery, because you're totally right. I was speaking to museum statistics because that is one path, but I used to teach at a university in Mexico, in Monterrey, Mexico. And the first thing I told my students was they're being in the art world. It's kind of like, my analogy was, it's kind of like going to Las Vegas. There's several tables and each table offers something different. So if you want to play the roulette, you have to go through the rules of the roulette. And if you want to play blackjack, you have to assume the rules of blackjack for playing, or you can go to the machines, pop a quarter and get what and play on that. And each one has a different rule. And there's people at one validation. So if your goal is to be on a museum collection and go to biennals and exhibiting biennals and such, then yes, the galleries is your path. But there's plenty of people that is not the path that they want to follow, and it's totally respectable as well. I was talking more in reference to people who want the validation to get into museum collections as well. But I feel that whichever path works for you, and if you are totally happy and content with selling directly and you feel whole and complete with that, that's perfectly fine. So I'm gonna take the question from Patty, Patty Comenta, who has been waiting. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you for everything, giving this space to be vulnerable and talk about, relevant stuff that, not necessarily is constantly on the table for women, right? We currently have as females so many battles going on in this country and outside in our own countries, in Venezuela, in Mexico, in Latin America as a whole. So I just wanted to point out that as Alana said at the beginning of the conversation, I think it's super relevant for us to keep bringing the subject to the table. Right now, of course, there are pressing matters as, the freedom of abortion, the freedom of election of your own over your own body, and those core things that have a precedence over so many other things, right? But I think it's important to keep bringing this subject to the table. And thank you, because as a minority in the country and as an immigrant as well, I feel not only represented, but I feel that art will always be a healthy way of expression, and it can be also louder than words sometimes. So I think it's just great for this space to be created to remind ourselves its importance. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty, for your comment and for being here. Laura, you have your hand raised if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say, not an artist, just a person, but hopefully 3 quick things. Just appreciating the talk, appreciating everyone's comments, and interesting, because I really could only think of, like, just as you said, Frida Kahlo. And then, but at the end of your talk, when you were talking about what you put on your wall, I realized, oh, but when I think about actually what's on my wall, I've got 3 more artists that I could actually name: Eva Cassidy, Carol Grigg, and then there's another that I just want to elevate for everybody, Bisa Butler, who's being credited with actually creating a new genre of textile art. She does quilting with a vibrancy that they're like quilt portraits with a vibrancy that sort of is similar to what you see in a Georges Seurat work. It's amazing. And then also on my walls, I have my daughter, which she doesn't sell art. She just makes it for me, and I love it. But on the topic of what to do, I just have this wondering. So when I bought a house last year, and I went to blackrealtor.com to find a realtor, and that worked really great for me. So if you're into independent bookstores, you like to support independent bookstores, and there isn't one in your neighborhood, you can actually go to a website that's called bookshop.com and buy like virtually from an independent bookstore. And I'm just wondering about whether or not there's a, a possibility for sort of like a virtual teaming of galleries that support women artists to create sort of a, a visible space for women artists of all kinds. So thank you.
Thank you for your question, Laura. So I found, as I was researching statistics for the talk, that there are a couple of websites that they are like almost like a union for women artists, but it's not necessarily a place for sales. But if you make search like on different platforms like Artsy and other platforms, you can actually make a search just for women artists. Locally, you have the Washington Park for the Arts. Washington Park for the Arts, it's an organization that helps, supports, and promotes. You can also make search by names and by gender and by technique or by as well. Transformer Gallery is also another space that supports a lot of the local artists. If you want to stay local, there's plenty of art dealers. We actually have one here tonight, Gaby Mises, and there's other art dealers as well that work in the area, and they do have a lot of women represented on their archives and the names of their artists. So I don't know of a website that you can go like library and the examples that you gave us, but I think it is feasible by making searches, customized searches on different platforms that sell art.
I guess I'm also just wondering if maybe we shouldn't talk that idea up. Maybe somebody should do it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great idea.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Irene. I think we are almost on time. Maybe we at the finish of this amazing conversation. I think, Annie, I will give the mic to you, but I will say that Making Visible is a space for all of you guys. If you also want to have your work here, please do it, and let's try to make something. Maybe we can think on something with Making Visible to make this visible and to have an art exhibit or something. So please count on us, and you have our space for you always. And thank you, Rene, and thank you everyone, because your participation, your sharing has been amazing from the heart. Having so many people being part of this group of artists it's something that makes me feel really comfortable. Maybe we need to do more of this same topic. We were trying to find out with this standalone conversation, but I think that the topic can give us for more sessions. So Annie, I don't know what you want to say.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm surprised by the number of people and the engagement we got on this topic in such short notice. It's clearly something that is meaningful to a lot of people, and I appreciate everyone's deep sharing and really being willing to open to this topic. And yeah, I guess it's sort of like a tip of the iceberg thing. There's just so much happening right now for women that this is a piece of it that we don't always see, but there's a lot of it in different places. So it's not easy. It's not easy. And I if we can find ways to change, I love that we have been given some tools tonight, some ideas for things we can do. And I love what Adriana just said too, is like, how can we come together to do things as well? So be in touch with us.
I can show, I have one of the,
Let me put
I
you
just
on.
bought Irene's
Hang
two
on.
pieces that you just saw in the presentation. And this is amazing because these are part of Irene's life as well. So whoever wants to show their work with Making Visible, please just let us know. I just wanted to show Irene's work because it's super nice and cute. And this is the, ¿cómo se dice tendedero, Irene?
The closed line, where you put the clothes to dry, closed line, is it?
I think that's something from Mexico. I don't know.
No, they use it. I mean, they use it less, but they do use it here.
In
Yeah.
Argentina too.
Yeah, we use
Thank
them.
you.
We use them. They just sort of gotten out of style. I still try to use it. All right, we'll have a final bell, and then we'll see if there's any other announcements. I put a notice in the chat about connecting with us through making-visible.org and donating there if you can to help us pay our speakers and keep the programs coming. So, all right, I'm going to finish with a bell and a little bit of dedication of our time together. So from this time that we've spent together, may all of our words and wisdom and our hearts go out to the world and in some way make some difference, small or large, in healing the world and bringing more ease and joy and freedom to all women and all beings everywhere. And thank you, dear friends, for being here. And thank you, Don, for captioning. And
Rachel for all the work. She does a lot of the work of making visible. So all the communication. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Yeah.
And we have
Thank you, Adriana and Annie and everybody on the Making Visible team for the invitation and for opening the space for me and for talking about these issues and raising awareness of, on this topic.
Yes, and I just want to add that Don says he is very willingly here.
Thank you. And we have our next series is we are starting in June, and we are gonna have a series on environmental justice led by Indigenous people from the Indigenous people perspective. So I hope we can count on all of you. And I think maybe next week you will have in our website information about what we are going to talk about, and maybe already some of the 3 speakers that we are going to have with us. So please help us spread the word about Making Visible.
And can I add one more thing, is that the series we were trying to get going, that we really have a lot of people with passion, but no one really wants to speak on, is anti-Muslim racism. And we've been really trying to pull that together, and it's been a lot harder than we expected. So if you have thoughts or, ideas that you want to email us, we would be open to that. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please share this conversation and other ones that we have, as I said at the beginning. Share Making Visible to your friends.